let's bring in SAPS General Jeremy Vearey, former SAPS General Jeremy Vearey, to talk about what happened both at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry yesterday and what we saw unfold in the ad hoc committee looking into these allegations of political interference and influence in terms of crime syndicates in South Africa, which is unfolding in Parliament. Jeremy, good morning to you and welcome. I want to start where I think you and I left off the last time, which was expectations from the Madlanga Commission and the ad hoc committee, but specifically in reference to the security and safety concerns that were raised yesterday at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry before we get into some of Sibiya's testimony. Good morning and welcome, by the way.
Hi, good morning. Good morning to you and the viewers.
Oh, Jeremy, yeah,
yes.
So the first question is around the evidence that was given yesterday, which we were able to hear at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. But of course, there were some concerns around security there yesterday.
I think one of the concerns, earlier, right in the beginning, we picked up, and one of my big concerns is how witnesses will be testifying in camera in terms of whether or not, even if you do a remote system, whether or not there would be some way of reverse determination of exactly who they are. You know, these days we have type of technology that does voice stress analysis and all those things, and voice print analysis, and these things are available in the private sector. So, you know, if you can find the pattern, especially if you have a long, enduring person testifying, it becomes concern. So one of the first concerns would be how you scramble or disguise the voice of that person. The other issue would be from a testifying point of view, one of the challenges, for example, when you blot out people's faces, is that, you know, nobody can see the person's demeanor. And body language and demeanor is an important thing when you evaluate possibly evasiveness, and like in a normal interrogation that I used to do, I used to study those things, particularly beyond the words that a person tells me across the table in an interrogation. So these are particular kind of issues that becomes matters of concern.
And
yeah.
right,
so those are some challenges that comes with not only security concerns, but that might create a problem from detection point of view.
Yeah. I want to pivot from there because we know that quite a bit of the testimony was centered around the WhatsApps that were allegedly exchanged between Vusimusi, Kat Matlala and several other prominent figures. And go straight to Sibiya, because I think this is also very squarely in your wheelhouse, Jeremy, in terms of understanding the connections, the lines of authority and command, and the testimony specifically of Sibiya in confirming the authority that Senzo Mqunu believed he had, which was reiterated and confirmed and affirmed yesterday by Sibiya as well. Essentially, as we heard him say right from the very beginning, somebody who felt as if he was made and is being made to be a scapegoat in the proceedings we see unfolding before us. What are your thoughts on what you heard yesterday? What's standing out for you particularly?
I think the first thing is beyond the content, is what was not clarified yesterday is the process that involved the validation of those WhatsApps in order to make 100% sure that we're dealing with something authentic that hasn't been tampered with. Now, what that would have is to look at that the integrity beyond any tampering of any WhatsApp should, in the case of WhatsApps or any other messages, be determined before we look at the content to determine whether it's admissible or whether it's acceptable, whether it is really what it is. Because WhatsApps, based on my experience, both in intelligence before, we can create these things. We can clone your number. We can, for example, then reproduce a message identifying you as the person author. And because we know your pattern of speech or pattern of writing, we can reproduce that. I think that firstly is a concern that must be eliminated. Now, how do you eliminate that? One of them is to ensure that you assure the court, in this case, in a particular criminal case, or in this case, the commission, that the chain of possession and extraction of that thing is above all possible questions or above any possibility of tampering. So that is a concern, but we do not take WhatsApps and messages at face value because we know all of these things can be replicated.
I want to come into the testimony at the... Yeah, I want to go into the testimony, Jeremy, if we may, in the ad hoc committee, and General Sibiya there, again, doubling down on what he had said the previous day insofar as his connections with people who are alleged to be crime kingpins, people like Brown Mokgotsi, defending his connection or his communication and relationship, in inverted commas, to them. What are your thoughts on what MPs have criticized as being something that is dangerous for the office of someone like a Deputy National Police Commissioner?
The first thing to understand is that General Sibiya in Parliament gave an answer to the version put out there by General Mkhwanazi. So General Mkhwanazi's version was then questioned by the responses in Parliament by General Sibiya's version that he gave. And I want to stress, we have two versions here, okay? The truth and what is the truth will be determined by those parties who have to evaluate and weigh up those two versions in terms of its cogency, in terms of validating whatever processes we use to procure whatever information supports those versions, and ensuring that the chain of evidence that led to those versions being put is above all integrity. Now, or tampering for that matter. So on the version of General Sibiya, the way I've listened to him, he gave on his version what is a plausible explanation for everything. I think the meetings and all of the contacts that that Mkhwanazi did. Now let me just stand still there. I've had experience with such cases before where we take technical law, what we get from the lines to court, and we have to testify to it, where a suspect says one thing, it is pre-captured by us in the police, and we argue it to mean something with another person who might be a witness potentially, or might be a technical expert or an analyst. And in those cases, if there's plausibility before the court, that questions the first version. In a normal court of law, reasonable doubt would probably enter into the picture.
Yeah.
If the court cannot find conclusively on both. This, when we're dealing with a commission of inquiry, it is even a lesser standard of evidence that is here involved, of evidence transmission. It is a civil standard and not a beyond reasonable doubt standard as in a criminal court. So I'm not comparing the two processes, but I want to make people conscious of the fact that you do not only throw out those processes, its cogency and its authenticity still needs to be.
Jeremy Vearey, thank you for that insight into how some of this evidence will be viewed.